What's up friends, Dan Vega here, and today we're talking all about full stack Java development with Spring Boot and Vue.js. There are a couple different approaches you can take to building these types of applications. The one we're going to look at today though combines them both into a single project. And this has a lot of pros, one of which is you'll get a single deployable artifact. So if this sounds interesting to you, stick around and we'll build it together, and we'll do it right after this. If this happens to be your first time coming across one of my videos, my name is Dan Vega. I run the website danvega.dev, and I'm a software developer, educator, content creator. Most of all, I like to take what I've learned and go ahead and teach that back to you. So today what I'm talking about is creating a Spring Boot and Vue.js project together. So the reason we're over here on my website is I actually have an article that details a lot of what we're going to go through today. So if you need some of the code snippets, if you want a little bit more detail, sometimes I find it helpful to kind of just watch a video and then come back and actually work on whatever the author created. So feel free to go ahead and just sit back and watch this video, and you can always come back to this article later, which I will have linked below to go ahead and replicate what I'm doing here. The other good news about this is there is a GitHub repository that I'm calling Full Stack Vue, or Full Stack Java and Vue, I think. Anyways, you can find this over on GitHub. The link's right here at the top of the article. What this will do, it will give you all the code that we're writing today. And I find it a very good starting point if you're going to create these types of projects. If you want to create a Spring Boot project with Vue.js as the front end, this is a really great way to do that. Now I am going to follow this up. We are using the Vue CLI in this. We're using Vue 3. I'm going to follow this up. Vite is something that's hit my radar in the last few months that I really am excited about. And it's just another way of creating a Vue project on the front end. So if you haven't heard of Vite, I'll go ahead and link to that below as well. They just hit 2.0. So congrats to Evan Yu on that. I'm really excited about that project. So maybe we'll follow this one up with just using Vite to go ahead and create the Vue side of the application. So again, if you want to go ahead and read through this, that's great. But with that, let's go ahead and just jump right in and start writing some code. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is create a new Spring Boot project. That is going to be the base for our application. Now you can do this from start.spring.io and import that project into whatever IDE you want to use. You can do it right from within Visual Studio Code if you like. I'm going to use IntelliJ Ultimate Edition just because that's the version that I'm using, but you can also do this in the free version of IntelliJ by importing the project that you create from start.spring.io. So with that, we're creating a very simple project today. We're going to just click next, and we're going to go in and create some properties here. I'm going to say, let's come in here and change the group to dev.danvega. We'll say full stack Java. This is going to be a MAVEN project. Java, jar, I'm going to use Java 11, and that all looks good. I'm just going to keep this package simple. Next, I'm going to go ahead and select the Spring Boot Dev Tools, and from the website, I'm going to choose Spring Web. And that really is all there is to it. We're just going to create a single endpoint in a controller that our front-end Vue.js client can consume. So I'll go ahead and click Next. And where I'm going to store that, I'm going to store that in a folder called boot. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish and let the project build. The first thing I'm going to do is go into source main Java and open up the main application class. I like to go ahead and run this application just to make sure that the project was created successfully and that we're starting with a clean slate. So here we go, started full stack Java application in 1.2 seconds. So great. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new package. We're going to call it controller. And in there, we're going to create a new message controller. And this is going to be a message controller that has a single endpoint. And we're going to use that endpoint to go ahead and test out our front end application. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is a REST controller. I'm going to set a request mapping of /API/messages. And I'm going to create a single endpoint. We're going to use a get mapping, and this is going to be at hello. And this is going to return a string. And it's just going to return full stack Java development with Spring Boot and Vue.js. So that is the gist of it. That's all we have is one single endpoint that you can get to by performing a GET request at /API//messages/hello. So at this point, I could go ahead and restart my application. If I had DevTools wired up correctly, it would have done it automatically. But now I can go over to the browser and I can hit that endpoint. I could also use a tool like Postman or Insomnia to do that. But in newer versions of IntelliJ IDEA, you can do that right here in your IDE. So I'm going to go ahead and test this out by going to open up the HTTP client. And looks like I picked up one from before. But all this is saying is, hey, I want to perform a GET request at localhost 8080 API, messages, and hello. That looks good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run. So it performs a GET request at that URL. And here are some of the headers. We're going to get back some text plain here. And here is the response. We're getting back that exactly what we hope to get back. So it looks like our REST API is working as expected. So far, so good. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our front-end application. And so if we look at our project structure here, we have source main Java. Inside of there, we have our main package, and we have our controller package. So this is where kind of all our Java code lives. So what I want to do is actually go into source and create the Vue project in here. I don't want it in main. I don't want it in test. I just want it in my source folder. So what I'm going to do is actually open up terminal right here from the IDE. So again, this is a really great advantage of using IDE. Kind of, as you see, I haven't really had to leave the IDE. I've been able to use the command line. I've been able to run tests against my REST endpoints. So really being able to stay here in the IDE, it keeps me productive. So what we're going to do is, where are we? We are not in the source directory, so we want to cd into the source directory. And in there is main and test. So now what we want to do is we're going to use the Vue CLI to go ahead and create a new project. So I'm not going to walk through installing the Vue CLI for now. If you want to, I have some other videos on that, which I'll link to below. But once the Vue CLI is installed, you can go ahead and create a new project with it. And so I'm going to go ahead and run the command vue create, and we're going to name our client front end. So I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to take us into interactive mode here. So today we're going to be building a Vue 3 project. So we're using the Vue 3 preview, and I'm going to use npm. All right, and with that, if you look in source, once we refresh that, you should see a front end folder. You'll see that it already ran the npm install, so it installed all the dependencies. We have our public folder, source folder, and then just everything that you would expect to find in a Vue.js application. So again, the folder structure here is very important. So we have source, front end. Then if we look at this, it says we can just go ahead and cd into front end and run npm run serve. I just want to check something really quick. So we don't want this Spring Boot app to be running. So Spring Boot by default will start on 8080. So does Vue. If Spring Boot is running, Vue will just pick another port and start on like 8081. But I just wanted to keep that stopped for just a second. So if I go ahead and click run npm run serve, we'll have our application running at localhost 8080. And I will go ahead and open that up in a new window. And there's our application. So this is just, again, the boilerplate Vue.js app you get out of the box when you create one using the Vue CLI. So now I'm going to go ahead and stop our server, clear that out, and let's talk about putting these two together. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some configuration so that our Vue application will solve a couple of problems. And we'll talk about this as we go. So we're going to create a new file here in the front end. We'll say new file. And this is going to be vue.config.js. And I'm going to go ahead and say don't ask and go ahead and add that. I'm going to paste in some code and we'll talk about this. So again, this is just a way to configure Vue. I'll leave a link, or actually this link right here will get you good enough. Again, this is in the blog article that I wrote. This is just some configuration here for our dev server. What we want to say now, so we don't hit those 8080 and we don't conflict with our Spring Boot application. We want to say that our dev server is going to run on port 3000. Then what we also want to say is that anytime you reference /API, we want to go ahead and target localhost 8080, and that is what our Spring Boot app will be running on. Now this is important because if we write any type of code that is going to interact with our REST API, we can just say /API/messages/hello, whatever it is. We don't have to prefix it with localhost 8080, and we wouldn't want to do that because that is going to change when we get into other environments. And so through some environment variables, we can change that as we go through the different stages like testing and production. So we're just going to keep that simple, and we're just going to have one here today. But again, any route that goes through API will now be automatically forwarded to localhost 8080. So that's what this configuration does, and it really simplifies your development. So let's go ahead and save that. I'm going to close some things out. Let's close this out. And the next thing I want to do is go ahead and open up source and app.vue. So app.vue is the main component that is loaded when your Vue application starts. And I want to start by cleaning this up by just kind of removing a few things. So let's go ahead and remove this. Maybe we'll keep the hello world component, but we'll end up cleaning that out as well. So I'm going to get rid of these styles as well. And if we go into hello world, let's just clean this out. We do not need props. And again, I'm going to remove the scope, the style, because we won't need those as well. So what I'm going to do here in the hello world component, again, we could just do this in app.vue, but I'm just showing us using a component. So what I want to do is actually create an h1 tag, and in there I'm going to display a message. So down here in my export default in my script block, I'm going to create some data. So this is reactive data. We need to return an object for it to be reactive. So we're going to say that the message is an empty string, and the empty string is going to be the default. What we want to do is we want to use the mounted lifecycle hook in Vue. If you're not familiar with this, head over to the documentation, and there's a bunch of information there about the different lifecycle hooks in Vue. But what I want to say is when this component is mounted, I want you to go ahead and do something for me. So that something is going to be to call out to our Spring Boot API and get that message that we set in our hello endpoint. So again, remember, we don't have to prefix it with the actual server name and port. We can just say /API/messages/hello. And what I want to do is say when that happens, you're going to get the response. And I just want you to get the text out of that, because remember, we return text from there. Then what I want to say is I want you to go ahead and take that data and set this dot message equal to whatever is coming back there. So that really is all we need to do in the Vue application. So again, just to recap, we have our app.vue. It is importing the hello world component. In the hello world component, we are displaying a message at the top. That message is defaulted to an empty string. And then when this component is mounted, we're going to call it to our Spring Boot API, hit that endpoint that returns that text message, and we'll go ahead and set our message data property to the return of that. So that all looks good. I guess what we can do now is we should go ahead and run our Spring Boot application. So let's run that. And I'm going to come back over to terminal and npm run serve. So now, if everything is working correctly, I should be able to go back over to the browser and say localhost 3000, because remember we changed the port that it's on. And there it is. So basically, remember 3000 hits the main view application, which loads up our app component, which again loads up that hello world component, calls our Spring Boot application, and returns this text. All right, so I'm going to go back to the article because there are a couple of things that we're going to copy and paste. I don't think you want to watch me type all this out, but I do want to explain it. We'll put it in our project, and you can always copy this yourself, and we'll put it in our project, and we'll see if things kind of pull together. So as you see there, when it comes to the production goal of a monolithic application, basically having that single deployable artifact, to do that, we're going to need to do a couple of things. We basically want to build a production version of our Vue.js application and copy that into the target class's static directory. The reason for this is that anything in that static directory will now look for an index.html and serve that up. And that's what happens when you run npm run build on the Vue.js application. It will create a production-ready front-end application, and that has an entry point of an index.html. So that side of Vue, the build, will go ahead and create us everything that we need. And then all we need to do is go ahead and copy that into target class's static, and this will go ahead and get bundled with our jar, and then we can take that jar file and deploy that anywhere, right? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to open up our pom.xml, and we want to make sure that a couple of properties are set. So let's go ahead over there and see what that looks like. So we're going to go down and open up pom.xml, and I'm going to close this or put this down for now. So we have our Java version. I'm just going to go ahead and replace this with what was in the article. So we're going to set a node version. This is the node version that we're using, and this is the version of NPM that we're using. And actually, I want to check that because since this article was written, I probably have updated this. So let's go ahead and we can run node-v. So we are way past that, npm-v. All right, so let's go ahead and update this. And this should be fun because I haven't tested it on these versions. So let's hope this works. And next, we want to locate the build section and add the front-end Maven plugin. So these are basically two Maven plugins that's going to allow us to accomplish what we need to get done here. So I linked to the front-end Maven plugin. You can take that. This plugin downloads and installs Node and NPM locally for your project, and then runs npm install and npm build to build your Vue application. So again, I didn't necessarily need to change those versions. And in fact, if it doesn't work, we'll kind of revert because it's going to look at those versions and that's what it's going to download, I believe. We'll see how we go here. So the output for the build is then stored in source front-end dist. And so what we end up doing here, we so install node and npm. So that's the goal. And then, yeah, you see the node version and the npm version that we want to install. So there's another execution that basically runs npm install, and finally one npm build, and that will go ahead and place it in the source front end dist folder. So let's go ahead and copy this plugin. Go back here and under build plugins plugin, we're going to add one here. Now we're going to come back, and the next thing we're going to add is the MAVEN resources plugin. And so this handles the copying of the project from the output directory, or to the output directory, sorry. So you'll need to copy everything from source front end disk, because that's where Vue builds the production ready version of the client. And then we need to copy that to this particular location. And so this resources plugin will copy from to here from here. All right. So we're going to go ahead and add this plugin as well. And that should give us everything that we need. So now what we can do is from the command line, you can now run clean package, and let's go ahead and give that a shot. So we are all done here. I want to make sure, I just want to stop my application. So again, from here, I'm going to say MVN clean package. And let's see what that does. And we do have an error. Okay. So the goal you specified requires a project to execute, but there is no POM. That makes sense. We are not in the right directory. So MVM clean package. Okay, this is looking better. So first thing you can see, it's installing Node and NPM here. It's going to proxies. Great. So everything went, everything ran successfully. So we ended up with a jar here, building jar, uses Vega right here, full stack Java snapshot.jar. So now if everything went accordingly, this is our single deployable artifact. So this will contain the Spring Boot backend application and the Vue front end application. And now we can take this jar and just deploy it to any cloud environment. So we can go ahead and test this. I want to run java-jar, and we're going to say target, and that was full stack Java. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can see starts up pretty quickly. So let's head back over to here. And this time we're going to go to 8080. And again, 8080, that's because that is the default port of the Spring Boot application. This is a Spring Boot deployable jar, right? So if we hit 8080, what happens is the Vue application is in that static folder. That static folder has an index.html, so that's what is served up to the browser. And if we wanted to, we could even go to API/messages/hello. and see our text there. So cool, like I said, what we could do then, I said this in the, if we want to go back to the article. So now with this single artifact, you can go ahead and host this somewhere like Heroku, AWS Beanstalk, Azure for Spring. So this gives you just one project that you can host in one place. So there are other ways of creating these types of projects. You could create a front-end Vue application, host that in one environment, create a Spring Boot jar and host that in another environment. And this really, I went into this in the article, this really depends on the makeup of your teams, the requirements of your application. So I just wanted to kind of give you this one approach to building these types of applications. Again, all the links for everything we talked about in this article, and the video, will be in the description below. The GitHub repository is also going to be in the article and the description below. If you want to clone this, and this would be a good start if you just want to kick off a new project. So yeah, I think that's it. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, it would help me out a lot if you went ahead and clicked that thumbs up for me. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And as always, friends, happy coding.